So we just went over, again, the background, and we went over the font a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and make sure my layers are visible by clicking on layers. The next thing I'm going to show you is if I want to insert a border with my picture. So I'm going to do that by going over to the shape tool. If you click and hold down, you'll see a rectangle, rounded rectangle, ellipse, polygon, line tool, and custom shape tool. For what I'm doing right now, I'm just going to keep the rectangle tool around. I'm going to select it, and then I'm going to look up at the top as to what I have. So I have fill and I have stroke. Fill is the inside color of the rectangle. Right now it's set to this pink color. If I click on it, I can change it. I can select a gradient. I'm going to keep it a solid color because I already have a lot going on in my picture. Stroke is the outside outline of a rectangle. So let me show you really quickly over here. If I don't have a stroke, hold on. That's out of context, not great. If I select a fill, let's just keep it on that recent color. I'm just going to have a plain rectangle. If I have a stroke around it, let's make it black so it's really obvious. I can adjust how big that is. You can see it's that outline border of the rectangle, and so I can make it bigger or smaller by adjusting that. Again, I personally don't want that for this project, so I'm going to go ahead. I'm actually just going to go back to layers and delete that layer. I don't need it. So I've shown you how to, again, I'm going to select my fill. I don't need stroke as an option, and I'm actually going to drop and drag behind my picture and hit return. I actually now, oh my gosh, it's in front of my picture. What do? Well, I have to go back to my layer panel, and remember the thing that's on the top of my layers panel, right now it's rectangle 1, is the thing that my file is reading at the front of my image. So to fix this, I have to drop and drag it behind layer 1. And that just means now it's physically behind. Again, I can do all kinds of other things. You can add other rectangles, you can add other borders. I'm actually going to go ahead, I'm going to try and make this one slightly different and add another rectangle behind that one to try and give it a ribbon, like almost a ribbon shape behind it. And this one is behind us, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change the opacity for now. Again, I've just gone under that layers bar and made sure it was on rectangle 2, made sure it was on the right layer, and toned down that opacity, and I'm much happier with that. And actually, that makes me just wonder if I should do the same thing with that other rectangle. It's a pretty bright pink right now. So once I'm happy with that, right now, the way this font is sitting is driving me crazy. So if I'm in my move tool, I can actually physically move this around and line it up better. So things are, and again, I can do that with all of my objects, and I might actually, just gonna move things. One thing you'll notice, possibly, is that, oh, I like that a little bit. I move things around a lot on my demo. It doesn't just like magically fall into place. Every time I design something, it's kind of a new challenge and a new way to do things. I actually pretty happy with the way this is right now, so I'm just going to leave it alone. I'm going to just drag that font down. But again, with all of my classes, the first time you do something, it's not always the best. You have to do this multiple times. So I can resize things, I can change colors, I can, again, make sure my border is an entire page apart. But now I have a pretty good base page. The last thing I'll show you with this is that background. So say I don't want a white background maybe I'm just bored of it, or I want something different. If I work directly on this background, that white layer, it's a lot harder for me to go back and change things after the fact. So before I start changing the color of my background, I'm going to duplicate that layer. I'm clicking under that hamburger bar, clicking duplicate layer, just leave it as a background copy. And now I have two backgrounds. Well, this one isn't locked. The other one is, and I'm going to leave it locked. But the copy is going to let me play around a little bit more. So I'm going to actually use the paint bucket tool. And before I do that, so my paint bucket tool is over here on the left. It tells me paint bucket if I hold it down. And it's just going to fill in my background color. What controls the paint bucket tool? The colors are these two little guys down here. These two little, and you can select it now if you want to. You can actually adjust it this way as well, but I'm going to show you this way. If I change my color down here, right now this is my foreground color, and that's what it's going to change. One thing that's kind of nice, you can either use the color picker, and there's several different ways you can do this, but you can drop and drag. That black circle is what your color you're going to end up with. You can see your new one. And I can, if I don't say I don't want a red, maybe I want a different color, like a green. I can actually slide this main bar and end up with a different color. The other thing I can do is I can see if I click outside right now, it has that circle. If I click outside of it, you see this little eyedropper. If I click on a color in my picture, it'll take me, it's selected a pixel in my picture and it's taken me to that color that I've selected. So I'm gonna just go in this general color family, but I'm gonna lighten it up a lot because I just think that that's not necessary. Now, this is the color it's going to transform to. So I have my color picker, and did you see how subtle that was? That's because it's set up here in my opacity bar to 17%. The last time I used it, I didn't change it. And actually, I really like how subtle it is. But to get the point across, I'm going to go to 100% and lay that color down. And you can see it's a lot darker than it was just a second ago. So I'm going to undo that. And I'm going to, let's set my opacity just a little bit higher, but not quite as dark as the 100%. There we go. And you can keep clicking on it and it will make it darker as well. So that's another option that you have. I don't tend to get too crazy with this because, you know, with the color in this particular project, because I like that. Or maybe we'll do one more. I want the emphasis to be on that picture, and I don't want my background to be fighting my subject. So solid background, you're using that paint bucket tool. You know, again, this is this color down here. So say I want a different color. I just have to click on one of those squares again. I'm going to hide this for a minute. I'm going to create a new background copy because I'm just going to show you gradients. That was another thing that I had mentioned in that document. So I'm going to leave background copy 2. Again, I'm really, I use gradients sparingly. They are really fun, but they are really easy to overuse. So if I go back to that paint bucket tool on the left on my toolbar, right above it, for me, it says gradient tool. Right, okay, here's the thing. I select it. The two colors that the gradient is going to form are those two colors that are in those two squares at the bottom of my toolbar. So if I go to use it right now, I can click. I'm just holding down because that's telling me where the gradient is going. And it's that really light green that I just had to that aqua. And say I want it to be a different kind of gradient, I'd have to exit out of that. That was linear. You can do radial where it's starting and going out. Of course, with this one, you can't really see too much, but there are different effects I can get. You know, there you go. There's a triangular effect. That's not too bad. But I'm just really careful about that. I usually leave my blending mode to normal, but you can change that, excuse me, and see how that varies. Again, I can change my opacity. So say I want like a really subtle gradient. I would just change it and let's see what happens like here. So now that's really light. It's not as distracting. Let's go ahead and put it back to 100%. And you can see every time I've been putting those down, you see there's a little cross that forms when I put my mouse down and I click. Then I have a tool, like a line that extends out from it. And again, that's telling my gradient where to start and kind of where to stop reaching color out. So you can see that yellow, well, it's light green, started where that little cross was, and then it stops. And I can't see it because of my picture right behind, where that ended. If I want to change the colors in my gradient, and you can also click on this, and there are some presets, so you can, already play around with like these colors. You don't have to do, I'll show you another way to do this, but I can change, like within this, I could change the color by clicking on that little square and then clicking color, or up here. So, again, say if like right now the preset is purple to green to orange, maybe I don't like that. Maybe I want to go purple to green to aqua. I can reset that by just changing that color. If I want a little bit more control, so those are really useful, I can go back down again to these little boxes here, and I can change the colors. I just clicked on that little square, and I can change both foreground and background. So again, if I don't have two separate colors, it's not going to form an effective gradient. Let's get a little bit more contrast. So remember, where my cross starts is where my gradient starts, and then where it ends is where kind of the new color starts to end. I don't know if you can see that. So again, my design, I'm not going to use it, but I want you guys to be aware of that. I'm going to keep that light green background, and I'm going to hit the eye and keep it on. You can see, again, this is slightly different than the design I came up with in the image document I've put together, and that's okay. I just wanted you guys to get the steps. And say, I'm looking at this, and I'm actually pretty happy with this. Say I want to resize that rectangle. I'm going to select the layer it's on. I'm going to hit that move tool. I'm going to edit, transform, scale, and then I can resize it. So if I'm not happy with the size that it was, I can make it bigger. I can try seeing what happens when I extend it across the page. Which I don't love, but if I don't want it, I'm just going to hit escape, and it'll keep my original picture. So lots of things, lots of options. I encourage you to think about the discussion posting, looking at other examples of children's books. If you already have some lying around, look and see how they have spent time setting up that page. This is kind of my beginnings of how to get this project started. If there are other tools or techniques that you know how to do, feel free to use them. But again, I think that for the purpose of this, a good design is really kind of clean and simple and easy to look at. So the other thing I'll mention is that I have, again, images of pages I've put together, and then there are a couple student ones that are up as well. So I wanted to give you guys some food for thought as to how to start this part of the project. And yes, it does take a little bit longer. Once I'm happy with my page, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save it. So a good thing I like to do, but it does take up more space on your computer, I like to save my files in Photoshop as Photoshop files. So if I want to go back and change anything, I can. I'm just going to hit save. But I can't upload this to Flickr, and I can't share this with people. Not easily. So I'm going to go ahead and flatten my image, because now I'm going to make a file where I'm going to upload it. I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to hit Save As. And again, it makes it smaller. Instead of a Photoshop file, I'm going to save it as a JPEG, and I'll just keep it like that. I'm going to hit Save. As long as my picture is 2 megabytes or under, I'll be fine. So I'm just going to leave it at an 11. For the purpose, again, of our class, it's not a big deal. And I'm going to hit OK, and now I have this saved. So this is my front page, my question. Then I would make an answer page, and I'm not going to, it's the same process. So I have that already designed. If you guys are really struggling this week, please let me know, and I can go ahead and throw together another video. So I again, it's the same technique. I use the exact same tools. I just changed things around a little bit. You can use in your answer. So again, like but the image I had on my other online was, oh, it's a rock from the rock house. You can check that out on the module in Canvas. But the thing that I want to think about is I can include that zoomed out picture if I have one. So that's why I mentioned that earlier on the module. So if you need to take those, you can. But the highlight, again, are these really kind of up close detailed shots. And you can get much closer than I have here. But this was just, again, a good example for a demonstration. So 5 pages total, like 5 sets of pages total, front and back. So that's 10 image files, and then you're going to make a cover file. And I have shown you an example of that cover. Again, it's in the module. Again, if you're really struggling, let me know, and I'll show you how I went about doing that. But everything I've shown you, all the tools, are going to be the same for these every single page. I'm going to be thinking about the text, maybe the shape tool, my color bucket or my paint bucket tool, and inserting that picture onto the page. How I lay it out, though, is up to me. So, all right, I really look forward to seeing these. These usually turn out pretty exciting for me. So, again, let me know if there's something that I haven't covered and that you're really lost. Also, let me know that, because I definitely want to make sure you're getting the most out of this.